The U.S. Supreme Court has ordered the Trump administration not to deport a group of Venezuelan migrants accused of being gang members. President Trump has invoked the Alien Enemies Act from 1798 to round up the migrants. That's an obscure law last used during World War II. The court order to pause the deportations came after an emergency appeal by lawyers for the Venezuelans. They are currently being held in detention in Texas. The temporary halt is the latest ruling by the Supreme Court against Trump's deportation plans. Officials are already defying an earlier court decision to return a wrongfully expelled man from El Salvador. U.S. Senator Chris van Hollen has traveled to El Salvador to meet with that man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He said the U.S. judicial system itself was under threat.
Kilmar Abrego Garcia was taken from prison to a hotel where he met with U.S. Senator Chris van Hollen. Van Hollen is a member of the Democratic Party. He says he traveled to El Salvador to fight for the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia, who lives in Van Hollen's district.
This case is not just about one man. It's about protecting the constitutional rights of everybody who resides in the United States of America.
The White House has accused Mr. Abrego Garcia of being a gang member. He has denied the claims and has not been convicted of any crime. Abrego Garcia was deported to his home country of El Salvador and brought to the notorious terrorism confinement center prison with other alleged gang members. The Trump administration later admitted Abrego Garcia's deportation was an administrative error, but refuses to bring him back despite a Supreme Court ruling on the White House to facilitate his return.
The people of this country want those people out, because what Biden did was allow millions and millions of people from jails, from prisons all over the world, people from mental institutions and insane asylums, gang members, drug dealers, pouring into our place. And you know what? Our people voted for me to get them out. They want them out. They want them out. And we've done a hell of a job.
At the beginning of the week, El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele visited Trump in the Oval Office. Both parties doubled down to their no to returning Abrego Garcia to the U.S. On Friday, Bukele posted pictures on X of Abrego Garcia with Senator Van Hollen allegedly, quote, sipping margaritas after miraculously rising from death camps and torture. Van Hollen has replied to the accusation, which has now been dubbed Margarita Gate, saying that the drinks had been placed on the table by a government employee to make it appear they were drinking cocktails. Meanwhile, other Democratic lawmakers have announced they will fly to El Salvador as well, as Abrego Garcia's future has become a focal point in America's immigration debate.
Joining me now is William Glucroft. He is a U.S. analyst and the deputy editor for Parliament magazine in Brussels. William, welcome back to the program. First of all, what crimes are the Venezuelans accused of?
Well, if the Trump administration has their way, they would all be gang members, which the Trump administration sees as a major threat to the United States. It doesn't really matter if this is true or not, because all of these people would require due process and a court of law to prove that they are actually gang members or engaged in violent activity. Based on reports that I've read, there's been instances of federal agents simply accusing these people of being gang members or involved in illegal activities, and that being the basis of them getting deported. That's just not how it works in a democracy committed to rule of law. That's how it works in an authoritarian state. And that's basically the basis of these various cases, including the one that came out from the Supreme Court this morning, that these people are entitled to due process.
You mentioned the court also insists on due process, but what if the executive branch simply doesn't comply?
Well, this is the test now, right? This is the test if the Trump administration is doing things simply, and I put simply in quotation marks, that are distasteful for many people, but still within the confines of the law and the confines of democratic rule of law, or if they're actually stepping over into constitutional crisis and authoritarianism. Because Donald Trump, it should be said, does have a mandate, did win the election, and he's doing what he promised he would do. And we've seen a skirting and certainly a widening gray zone of the Trump administration defying court orders. But you can easily come down on one side or the other on interpretation of the court orders. When a court says they must facilitate bringing someone home who should not have been deported, does that mean they absolutely have to? What does facilitation mean? These kinds of technicalities. And a lot of these these lawsuits and these court orders are coming down to technicalities about where people are located, which districts actually have jurisdiction. But nonetheless, there is the bottom line point that all courts are essentially saying that even if these people or any of these people are ultimately deported, it has to come after they have due process, after they have a chance to present their case and defend themselves.
Is this really a test case? Trump has promised to expel millions of undocumented migrants. Will this show whether the courts will be able to stop him?
Courts, and ultimately it would have to be Congress, because the courts can only make rulings. They have no ability to enforce them, really. You can't send a policeman to the White House door and say cease and desist. They can only say that that needs to happen. And then, again, it is an unknown and uncharted territory. What happens if the executive branch disregards that check on power? Of course, we should note that Trump is not unique in deporting lots and lots of people from the United States. Every president, Republican and Democrat, has done it. What's being done now is, let's say, much farther away from the rule of law and for reasons that violate other constitutional or could violate other constitutional rights and protections like freedom of speech, like assembly, like certain political views. This is a separate case not involving these groups of Venezuelans, but of course the various students, international students who have had their visas rejected, denied, and threatened with deportation. So that's what it is. It's the nature of these deportations, not that the deportations are happening, that are different with Donald Trump. So everyone, including rights organizations, are waiting to see how the Trump administration will respond to these various court orders as they make their way through the various levels and the various districts all the way up to the Supreme Court.
William Glucroft, US analyst and the deputy editor for Parliament magazine, talking to us from Brussels. Thank you, William.